Okay, 7:33. I think we should get started. Okay, who is ready? Who is ready? Coach Asha, if you're ready, we're ready to go. Okay, so we have started live streaming as well, thanks to the YouTube live. So hopefully we can capture a couple audience as well. 家长们，大家好。大家好，周五晚上好，是加州的时间的话，是美国的时间的话，然后国内的家长周六早上好。OK， 先给大家打个招呼。那个今天的话，非常欢迎大家来收听一下我们春季的一个讲座的系列。我先用中文讲，到时候呢，那个会邀请 Coach Asha 会上来，然后他会有一些。他会用英文，然后我们中英文都会穿插。那我先大概介绍一下我们这个系列的一个目的，然后我们会就开始进入主题，最主要是讲那个演讲辩论里面的一类。但是今天我们先慢慢来，是属于也是一个试验性的一个讲座嘛，那个看看大家的反馈会怎么样。我先自我介绍一下，如果是新的家长的话，我叫魏，那个一般学生或家长就叫我 Mr. 魏，或者是王老师都可以。在线上的话，有我的合作伙伴 Mr. David， 打一下招呼 ，Yes，OK， 我们是8年前是合伙做启迪学院的 ，So it's been a long time， right？ 已经过了很长时间了。然后线上的话，还有我们的沈老师，他现在可能还没有开摄像头。沈老师可以的话，可以开一下，给大家打个招呼。然后还有，等一下，待会儿在这里呢。OK， 沈老师你好，因为沈老师是我们中国区的那个总管，基本上所有的家长都会找他，然后他 local 的也会帮忙一些启迪的一些事务。然后这边的话还有我们的 Coach Asha， can you wave to the parents? OK， Coach Asha 是我们的是那个就是教练团队里面的核心之一，然后他会做很多就是课程上面的，然后也是最受学生欢迎的这个主教练之一，他也是带我们的竞赛队的教练。OK， 那今天的话，我们做演讲辩论做了那么长时间，但是那个有一些细节的东西，尤其是新生还有一些就是刚刚进来的，我觉得我们有一些工作还需要交代给大家，就是你到底是演讲辩论这么多的种类，那能不能再稍微深入的介绍一些这个演讲辩论的这些项目呢？那今天的话，那就是我们先从这个演绎类，我们叫 intern， 然后我们就开始先讲，然后学生或者家长那个有问题的话，随时可以在 Zoom 里面，或者你如果是在 YouTube 观看那个就直接的 live stream 的话，也可以在那边给我们问问题。然后我们当中会穿插回答一些问题，好吧？那我们就开始吧。OK， 先把OK， 可以看到这个 slides 吗？可以哈 ，OK， 行。所以今天的主要是4块，一个是给大家介绍一下什么是演绎类的演讲，很简单的一些定义。然后呢，我们会因为演绎类里面这种品种项目也比较多，但是我们就挑3个，我们叫基础演绎类的项目，一个是 Storytelling 故事演绎，一个是 Declamation 演说，然后还有一个是 Poetry 诗歌，就3种，我们先给大家介绍。那这样的话给大家有一些稍微深入一点的了解。然后第3个呢，我们就介绍一下 你怎么去学习，知道了这些有这么多项目，怎么去设计这个学习，然后当中的话就是有哪些因素可以让学生的话快速走向这个成功，对不对？然后最后一个呢，就是下一步需要做的，知道了这些信息之后，那不能就坐着，对不对？就不没有动作，那你应该可以采取的一些动作。然后呢，如果家长有什么问题的话，随时可以来问，好吗？今天的这个就是基本上是这样安排的。Okay, Coach Asha, I'm going to have you start taking over. Maybe give a quick definition of the interp first.
Yes. So when we look at the definition of interp, interpretation is a performance. It's generally performance of literature that you're communicating to your audience. The student or performer needs to analyze that literature and then figure out how they can use their own voice to communicate their analysis of that literature. And it's really a shared combination between the connection between the literature and the audience and how they engage the audience in their analysis.
OK, 我简单的讲一下，就是 interpret 这一类最主要的重点呢，其实就是有一个文学作品，然后呢，演讲者就是通过他的方式来去解释这个文学作品，然后把它演绎出来。基本上简单来讲就是这种，然后你可以想象成就像表演一样，就是你比如说要去演学校里面那些剧啊或者话剧啊之类的。跟这个就是演绎类的，基本上跟这个很像，主要就是对作品的这个演绎。OK， 学习 interp 的好处就是，大概的举几点，因为像这些有些家长如果是演讲辩论还不是特别了解的话，那至少听说过就是这方面。或者说自己肯定是在那个工作或者什么，这都有第一手的这个，怎么说呢？就是体会，对不对？演讲辩论是以后在学习工作里面非常非常有用的。那基本上的几块，其实第一是跟学习上就可以增进读写能力啊、阅读理解啊，包括就像 SAT 考试啊之类都是有好处的。然后它还有一部分呢，是等于我们叫软的一些实力 soft skills， 对不对？像情商啊，还有自信啊，沟通能力，这些都是非常非常有好处的。然后今天我们最主要还是讲那个这些类型。我们 Coach Asha 的有2个学生，我们先让他们学习这个 interp 的一些体会，让 Coach Asha 介绍一下。
Yeah, so we wanted to introduce some of our students that we've had the privilege of taking through the journey, starting from scratch up to where they are now, to the students that we're going to introduce some of their thoughts on what they've gained for an interp is going to be two students I've worked with, Nathan and Helen. Both of these students are now in high school and they have done extremely well in speech and debate competitions and are actually going to be heading to nationals this upcoming May and June to compete in interp events. So we have the student here, Nathan, and Nathan has definitely been on a journey in terms of his learning and progress. But what he specifically says, I think is so key, that he took up interp this year, and it has certainly been a journey, and a lot of the experience and lessons I've learned are applicable not just to speech and debate, but also to my future as a functioning member in society. It's an incredibly fulfilling artistic avenue where I can exercise my creative mind and build all these stories and characters myself with the guidance of my wonderful and amazing coach. And even for the less artsy students, it teaches important public speaking skills, which will inevitably be vital in future classroom and work settings. It's definitely helped me to step out of my comfort zone and feel more at home in my skin. So that is a little quote from our student Nathan.
我再多加几句，就是 Nathan 的话是我们差不多3年级、4年级的时候就来启迪来学习演讲辩论的，所以他的话已经经历了好几年、好几个 cycle 了，对不对？就是他的话，我们也看到了他的每年基本上都有成长。他以前是做过一些像平台类的，我们之后也会去讲这些类型。然后前几年呢，他也专注在这个就是辩论上面投入很多时间。然后今年开始重新又回到这个演绎类。然后他自己的体会就是说，这个是给了他另外一个出口，因为他本身也是在高中阶段也是学一些表演的，所以他正好可以把这些都结合起来，他把这些艺术类的东西通过这个渠道去表达。然后他说对以后的话也体会到对以后工作啊学习啊绝对都是非常有好处的。也让他可以不停的突破自己的舒适区，然后去做这样的表演。他今年的话马上就要去这个就是全国赛，6月份的全国赛去比赛。还有5月份的那个我们叫 Night Talk 也是另外一个全国赛，所以今年的这个成绩非常亮眼。 OK， 行，下一个 All right, next.
And this is from another one of my students, Helen. Actually, this is a picture from this year. We just got to go to Harvard competition where she placed in both her events. And she says, Interp has taught me to pace myself and really give me a sense of confidence I would not have achieved otherwise. Being able to perform a piece that I love and share my message in such a unique way through performance is what sets it apart from other events.
OK， 这是另外一位启迪的老学生了，他们年纪都很轻，但我们都叫他老学生，因为也是差不多小学阶段就开始跟我们学的。然后这张照片是 Helen 今年我们带队去哈佛的时候他获奖的这个照片。他的话 Interp 时间会比较长一点，然后我们也是每一年都可以看到 Helen非常多的进步，非常多的进步。因为 Interp 里面它本身就有很多种类嘛，所以它可以试不同的种类。之前的话它还没有试过，就是像 humorous， 就是今天的话不会详细讲，但是这属于比较进阶的这个演绎类的一类，就是朝幽默这边去走。然后它的这个赛季的成绩也是非常亮眼。 OK， 行，我们继续了。 OK， 那我们接下去的话就让 Coach Asha 把3类这个演讲仔细的稍微讲一下。 OK， Coach Asha, go ahead.
I think we can go to yes, thank you. So today we're going to be talking or introducing a little bit of the foundational Interp events. These are events that students start out with, and these are really great for building their skills, especially as they continue along their path, whether that be competitive or just in general in the world. There's 3 basic elements that we like to look at in terms of what goes into an Interp event across the board. So these 3 elements there is what we like to call a teaser. This is just to get your audience's attention. It's 30 to 45 seconds of the piece, and it just gets your audience to feel like, oh, I'm interested. I want to see what's going to happen next. The next key element is an introduction. And this also has its own set of 4 parts, which includes a hook. This is something to get the audience's attention in terms of the introduction itself. They introduce the piece, like giving a summary of what the piece is going to be basically covering. And then they want to leave you with a lesson or moral. What are we supposed to take away as the audience from this piece? And including obviously the title and author. Who is it written by? Giving credit where credit's due.
OK， 演绎类的话 或者我们也叫它表演类嘛，这样稍微方便一点。这些的话，最主要是3块。像这些基本上演讲都是有这种像模板或者结构一样。像这个3块呢，第一块是我们叫 teaser， 就是基本上是抛砖一样的，先抛一个砖，就是30到45秒钟的这个砖或者悬念。然后第2块呢是它的开头，就是开头的话也包括几个部分，像影子啊，还有它的开头，它的介绍，还有它的寓意。讲这个故事的话，或者做这个表演的话，它的寓意是什么？然后最后是标题跟作者都需要把它给印出来。可以，如果没有，看一下，可以 mute 一下吗 ？OK。然后最后一部分就是其余的部分，基本上是主要的那些部分，演绎部分的这个故事啊之类的。OK， 所以这是3个基本的成分。那我们继续。Coach Asha。
So I completely forgot in the last slide to kind of explain. So the 3 foundational interps that we're going to be covering tonight are poetry, storytelling, and declamation. So we're starting off with the first, poetry. Poetry is a 5-minute to 7-minute, depending on the age level. So for high school students, it's usually 5 minutes, and for middle school, it is 7 minutes. And what sets poetry apart from other interps is this is asking students to take poems, which can be very abstract thinking for a lot of students, and be able to pick out the themes in those, the messages that are in those poems, and then interpret that for an audience. Poems have a lot of different descriptive words. There's different styles of poetry that students can choose from. But the main thing that this sets this apart is that this is published poems, so not poems they write themselves, but published poetry that they then have to think about again. What are the themes? What are the messages that are within those poems? And then once they've analyzed that, they can then pick poems that they like and pick a theme, and either using one piece of poem or multiple pieces of poems, then interpret that, bring that to life for the audience. You want to pick poems that have things that you can act out, show, or demonstrate for the audience, poems that tell a story really for your audience. Usually the poems are written in first person, but again, there can be different styles that they can use. And then you have poems that connect you or inspire you when you read them. So this is really a body of work. Again, they can pick one or multiple and put it together and then bring it to life for the audience. And really being mindful about when they're cutting that, to think about what is it they want the audience to take away from the poem's message. So it's a lot of fun. It's a really great interp event to start out with thinking about critical thinking in terms of analyzing poetry.
OK， 这个的话很容易解释，就是我们可以把它想象成，就像我们传统以前小时候说的诗歌朗诵嘛，这个就是诗歌类的。一般是5到7分钟，就是我们是每个阶段，比如说高中的跟初中阶段，还有小学没有这个项目，所以是高中是5分钟，然后初中是7分钟。它里面关键就是不是你自己写的这个诗歌，都是从这个书本里面或者他已经发表过的诗歌里面去取这个几段或者一段或者几段，把它给组合起来。然后呢，你要做的就是把这个诗歌里面讲述的这种事情啊，或者这种心情啊、情感，都要把它给栩栩如生的表现出来。所以这个就是功夫所在了。OK， right. All right, let's go ahead, watch a demo, right? 大概是40几秒50几秒的一个演示，看一下啊。Hold on. Sure. See if that works. Nope. We do. See if it's not working for some reason. Still. Now 1 second. Give me. All right, I'm gonna have you guys watch here. Okay, I'll come back to that. So this is one of the 这个是当中前面2个学生之一 Helen 做的一个 demo， 我待会儿再试一下。现在好像有一些问题。
You want me to pull the
Okay,
link?
so yes, we'll come back to that. I think it will be for some reason when I go
Hold on, I think I have the link.
Okay, let's do you want to keep going?
Oh, do you want me to put the link in the chat?
We could. Let's do this. I apologize. Okay, I think let's move on. First, we'll kind of show the demo afterwards. If do you want to, Coach Asha, let's go ahead, continue.
Hold on a second to go back. Okay, so unfortunately we are not able to show the poetry demo, but we will go ahead and move on because we can pivot and talk about what poetry best practices. So when a student is approaching their poetry, what are the things that they should be being mindful of to be successful in putting together their poetry? So the first one is looking at the performance as a whole, right? When we look at the performance, because you're using such an abstract idea as poetry, right? The poetry doesn't always have a clear, it's not like a storytelling, right? Where it has a clear story. You have to make that story come to life. So we're looking at things like facial expressions, physicality, gestures to enhance the performance. Like, how do you bring it to life using your body language? We're looking at, are you comfortable in the space that you're using, right? And especially because this is one of the performances that does require what's called a black book. So this is a binder that the student's holding. So are they comfortable in their, the space and how they hold and carry themselves in their poise? The next is, and this is really critical, vocalization, because again, this is poetry. And again, it doesn't have sometimes a clear story or wording. So the best way to bring it to life is using your voice. This is your most powerful tool. So when we're looking at is, do they bring the words to life? Does the presenter use like vocal qualities like diction, pausing, volume to bring the story to life? Vocal qualities like rhythm, pacing. These are all things that the presenter can use to vocalize, emotion. If this poetry is supposed to make you feel sad, like they can change their voice to make the audience feel that sadness by portraying that through their vocalization. And the most important is cutting, because these poems can be, like, so they can use one poem or multiple poems. Either way, they need to cut it down to the time limit, but they still need it to make sense. It needs to feel like it's a completed beginning, middle, end. Whatever the narration, the story they're trying to tell through that poetry, it needs to make sense. So if there's a theme, the theme needs to be easy to follow throughout the selection. And they want to look at how they put it together. Does it flow well, right? Does it feel like out of place, out of balance? Does it make sense in how the emotion or the vocalization is developed throughout the piece? So This is kind of what we tell students to look for is these three key things is your performance. Think about how you're going to perform it for the audience so that you're not just standing there. Vocalization, how are you going to use your voice to bring the poems to life? And then think about cutting it. How are you going to cut the poems so that it all comes together and makes sense and flows together well?
Okay. Coach Asha 老师就是讲了一下这个诗歌朗诵的话，你怎么有几点核心的就是需要掌握的一些东西。第一块当然是所有的演绎类都是跟表演相关嘛，但诗歌的话更加注重这方面，因为它本身的话，诗歌它不一定有人物，不一定有故事，所以你不可能通过这些方式来吸引那个观众或者听众，对不对？所以表演上就是有可能在这个上面要多下功夫了。然后第二呢，就是声音的演绎是非常重要的，非常重要，就是也是在那个比如说你有一篇或者多篇这个诗歌把它给串起来的，这个通过声音来演绎出这个诗歌它表达的意境啊，这些都是非常非常关键的点，去怎么样把这个诗歌演绎的非常到位。然后最后剪辑是我把它讲成是像幕后一样，对不对？因为就是你一开始的话他没有说你去我要做一个诗歌朗诵，然后就有很多现成的东西，尤其是以后你要比赛的话都是要自己通过剪辑来挑选，我们待会儿后面也会讲怎么去挑选这些演绎类的讲稿，那剪辑是非常重要，怎么去把它拼凑起来，然后是可以达到去感染这个观众的这个作用效果，不好意思 OK all right next.
Yes, so the next foundational, I'd like to also say that each of these foundational interp pieces serves I think, different purpose. So like poetry really helps you to like learn how to dig deeper into the meanings of words, right? Declamation really helps you to learn how to give a presentation, how to spread a message, how to inspire people. So in Declamation is a 10-minute event, and students choose a speech that is delivered by someone else, and they can choose multiple different themes from like commonly it's historical speeches like that were given so in time to contemporary public rotation. So this could be things like valedictorian speeches or TED Talks, but the topics can really vary widely based on the interest of the students. But these are really, declamation is how do you present someone else's message in like a way that is inspiring, that gets across a message and takes on what the original speaker's intention, right?
OK， 第二类叫 Declamation， 这个的话没有准确的中文翻译，如果大家可以找到有准确翻译的话告诉我，我现在就把它解释成是演说。像这个演说呢，像比如说像名人的演说，或者就是你哪里听到的，像甚至于那个学校里面学霸第一的成绩第一的，然后他在最后这个毕业的时候他做的演说，你也可以把它拿出来。所以基本上是像我们叫这个像回锅肉一样 OK， 人家已经做过的这个演讲，然后你再去把它给演绎出来，但是你的目的基本上还是根据那个它本身的原意，就是不要有太多的变化，你看看怎么去，其实就我的理解，就基本上你是去学或者模仿这个原来的这个演讲者的他的那种表达方式，然后把他的这个起到的效果，把它同样可以起到的话，那你就成功了。这一类 Okay, all right. I'm not sure this is gonna work, so we'll see. Let me see if that could work. No. Okay. Let's see, can I do, for some reason, it's not working. Coach Asha, totally. Okay, I think we can, should we move on? Maybe during the Q&A, if we have time, I'm going to pull the YouTube link and I'll have everybody watch it backward. It's a little bit backward, but you do what you have to do, right? Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to the declamation best practices. So different from poetry, which really looks at vocalization and bringing this idea of a story to life, declamation, as I mentioned, is looking at you're reinterpreting, reimagining someone else's words. So the very first one we would look at is context, right? What is the context of the speech that you're delivering? And how does it flow? Especially when you're using someone else's words, they were meant for a specific purpose, right? So when you're passing that on to your audience, does the student understand the context and how are they delivering that context to the audience in a way that it gets across to them? And how does the context, flow effectively for the audience to understand it? Are the ideas that are presented, do they follow an order that makes sense for the audience? So the context is very important, again, because you are reinterpreting someone else's words that were meant for a specific time and place, especially if a student's not taking that into consideration when they're selecting the piece, the context can be lost on the audience. So it's very important to think about what is the context and what are you trying to get across to the audience. The next is delivery in terms of how the speech is performed. So is it appropriate for the situation? The student really needs to think about who was the original speaker? Who am I as a speaker? How do I want to deliver it to an audience in a way that it will get across and will still make sense to them? So do they use a different voice when they're performing that piece than maybe their regular voice? How do they incorporate hand gestures? Their poise, how do they hold themselves in relation to the delivery to enhance the message? Like I said, because you're taking someone else's speech, you really have to think about how am I going to deliver it to get it across to my audience in a way that engages them? And last is cutting the piece. This can be really important as well, because it really goes into how are you going to engage your audience in terms of being able to pull them into this speech that, again, they don't have, again, if you've set the context, you have good delivery, but how are you going to cut a speech? A lot of times these orientation speeches are taken from speeches that were a lot longer, and again, for a specific purpose. So cutting that down to fit within the time, you really have to be mindful about how you're putting together the words in order for it to still get across the message to the audience. So those are the three things that we tell students look for in declamation is A, what is the context of the original speech and how are you going to portray that to the audience? B is the delivery. How are you going to hold yourself, speak, add gestures in order to bring that to life? And then finally is how are you going to cut it so it all comes together?
OK， 阿莎老师讲了一下，也是3点这个演说的话，但这个里面的话，基本上你想一下，因为是人家讲过的这个演讲稿嘛，所以你其实要做很多研究，这个演讲稿是什么时候发生的，所以它基本上这个发生的时间、地点、人物啊，各种各样，这些就是上下文，对不对？所以你先要把上下文研究透，然后在做这个演讲的时候呢，也要去根据自己的理解，然后呢，也是不失它原本这个演讲者的这个作用的这个前提下，然后去看看怎么去发挥，是不是换一个声调啊，然后是在这个做手势啊、动作啊，各种各样的那个发挥的时候是到底是怎么去把有自己的那个解释嘛，但是呢也不失或者不离它本身的初衷，这是一个比较有讲究的 话题，对不对？然后最后一块呢，跟前面也一样，所有的这些演绎类其实都需要去剪辑，因为它有可能它上来的是20分钟或者30分钟，但是它的这个要求是10分钟嘛，所以你需要去比较巧妙把它剪掉，但是也还是可以把原来的核心的内容可以保留下来，这个都是学生需要去思考的一些问题。
Okay, so the last foundational, and this is really one that a lot of our students enjoy and a lot of our students start out with, is storytelling. So storytelling, again, is a great foundational because, first of all, it's only 5 minutes. And I think any student can pick up a 5-minute student, memorize it, and be able to perform it. It also is content that is engageable for all students of all ages because it's a short children's story. And they can choose any sort of theme that interests them. They can choose mysteries, heroism, fairy tales. They can choose stories that have really good message, such as fables, folklore. So they really get a wide range of choices in terms of picking a story that reflects them and that they will enjoy sharing. And I think storytelling is also really good foundational because it gives them so many of the basic building blocks that they are going to need to do other interps later on, such as movement and delivery, engaging your audience, thinking about how to spread that message. So it really is a foundational that includes all the basic building blocks that you need to be successful in interp and beyond.
Storytelling, OK， 讲故事，这个是属于入门级的最受欢迎的项目之一，对不对？那个基本上是属于他讲的这个故事也是发表过的，但是偏少儿型一点，所以他的这个故事的种类啊或者内容都是偏，比如说像神秘啊、英雄故事啊，那个还有一些寓言故事，都是非常好的一些素材。它的限时其实只要5分钟，包括高中阶段的话也是5分钟，所以相对来说是比较容易入门，但是你真的要把它给做出来表达出来也是需要下很多功夫的。那 OK Coach Asha, I think we're gonna skip the demo again. So sorry about that, but hopefully we can play that a little bit later once I get all the links. It's performed by Helen as well. Okay, let's talk about the best practices, Coach Asha.
So this is why I said storytelling is so great, because it includes so many different foundational elements. So when we look at storytelling best practices, we can start with expressiveness. So because you're bringing a children's story to life, I like to tell my students, think of it as if you're telling, if you have a younger sibling or a niece or sorry, not niece, cousin, just anyone who you've ever had to work, younger than you and telling a story, or if as a parent, we tell stories to our kids sometimes. So if they can remember like what it was like, what was their favorite parts of being told stories as a child. So what engages the audience more, especially when you can't see the pictures, you can't see the context, how you present it in your expressions, in your character building. So things like your facial expressions, your body positioning, how you, walk or move around the space that you're using. All of that can be used to basically bring your characters and story to life, which is, again, so much fun for the students to really be able to engage with the material on a deeper level, because they really have to think about, how am I going to show these different maybe characters or voices, or just how am I going to show throughout the story to bring that to life. And the next part of this is it also teaches them tone control. I think sometimes students don't realize how much your tone can affect how your message is presented. So things like putting emotions into your tone, being able to basically, does your tone align and make sense with the characters that you've chosen or the story that you're trying to tell? So we look at relatability. So does it feel like the student is relating to the story, but also does it relate to the audience? Does the audience feel like they have a connection in terms of when they're listening to the story, they feel like it relates to maybe something that's going on. Timelies wise, I remember one of the student video we were going to show you, she talks about reading and literacy in her introduction and how that's such an important skill for people around the world. So that would be relatable to your audience because they're like, oh yes, reading is a fundamental skill. So how does it relate to your audience? And then cutting, because again, a lot of times you're taking a much larger body of work and condensing it down. So does that condensed story still have a clear beginning, middle, and end? So it is a lot of different skills that they are pulling together to bring this story to life. And these are just, again, expressiveness, how they're expressing the characters, how they're expressing it through movement, how they're expressing it through even things like connecting with the audience through eye contact, body positioning, tone, how they say the words in the story, how they, convey the emotion of the characters, even things like how the characters sound. Do they have different voices? Relatability, does the audience feel connected to it? Is it timely for what's happening? The thesis they bring up, and does the student feel like it's appropriate, age appropriate for them, and they relate to it? And then cutting, how do they cut the message so it still has a clear beginning, middle, and end?
OK， 我简单讲一下了。其实讲故事的话，基本上就是一个人的一台戏，对不对？然后你就是有不同的这个人物啊，你怎么把它表现出来？那就是靠你的这个表现张力了，就是要把这种各种各样的人物，他的造型怎么样啊？但是你没办法，所有的就是演讲辩论里面，你不能穿服装，对不对？不能化妆，我就是一般的化妆可能可以，但是不能是做这种像那个万圣节一样的这种，所以完全是通过说跟那个舞台的走位，还有就是你的手势啊这种来去表达，所以这个表现力非常非常重要。语调那当然也是这个抑扬顿挫，对不对？就是把不同的人物把它给通过稍微舞台化的就比较夸张的方式去把它给表现出来。然后剪辑的话，那当然是非常重要。像故事，因为这个是一个故事，所以它是有开始，然后有戏剧冲突，然后可能有高潮，然后最后再到收尾。所以这些都是需要比较完整的。最后亲和力，你这个观众看了是不是他可以把它联系起来，你可以把观众引到这个故事里面。如果可以做到，那这个祝贺你，你就达到了这个讲故事的这种比较高的境界了。Okay, all right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about this key to success, Coach Asha.
Yes, so we've talked about these different foundational interp pieces, but the next question that a lot of parents will ask, okay, my student wants to do an interp piece. How do we find a piece that they can put together? So as we mentioned, each interp piece has its own selection rules. Poetry, you're pulling from different poems, printed, published poems. Declamation, you can pull from a myriad of different topics, like great historical orations or from contemporary speeches like TED Talks. And with storytelling, it's a short children's published story. But where do we look, right? Where do we start to look? So we tell people to go get inspired, look at something like books, go through your own personal library and see what books you might already have and already enjoy. So books are a really great starting place across the board for poems, declamations, stories, magazines, articles, videos, specific videos that you can find online. Anthologies, there's a lot of really great anthologies that you can find, multiple different either poems or pieces, newspapers, and TED Talks. A lot of my students love TED Talks, so I tell them, go find your favorite TED Talk. Whatever it is that you choose to pull, we just ask you to consider, when you're looking for a piece, consider your identity. Like, who are you as a person, and how do you pick a piece that resonates with you, right? Don't pick a piece just because you saw someone else doing it. Pick a piece that you actually enjoy and would want to perform for your audience. And 2 is social relevance. Think about how your piece fits into the world around you. What value does it bring to your audience to hear this piece, to hear this message here and now? Now, this may not apply as much with storytelling, but definitely for poetry and declamation, it can be really helpful to pick a piece that had some sort of relevance to your audience and the message that they might be inspired to hear. So those are things that we tell the students to consider, both with where to look for a piece and once they're selecting that piece, what to look for.
OK， 这个前面讲了，演绎类的都是需要从这些发表的作品里面去选择，所以选择作品是绝对是最重要的第一步。那个家长跟学生如果喜欢要阅读的话，这个表演类绝对是一个非常增加阅读量的一个种类了。因为我看到之前有学生的话，他们要去找这些作品，第一要可能是不停的找这些书本，他们以前阅读的书，或者呢就去找新的都可以。那你想想，如果要选择一个作品的话，有可能就把几本书读下来，然后再去找。我们有学生这个找作品可能要花几个月的时间才能找到心仪的一个作品。所以在这个当中的话，正好把阅读也给提上去了，对不对？这个就是变相的一个动力有。那选择作品的话，简单来说就是这个范围非常广，但是我们主要的话就是第一是不要挑人家已经选过的，最好是可以代表自己身份。代表自己身份什么意思呢？就是你大部分是比如说初中或者高中生，不要去选择成年人的，比如说30、40岁以上的这些，就是不是说不可能，但是你要把它演绎出来，一个成功人士啊，还是比较困难的，对不对？符合自己身份的，然后呢，最好是跟社会也合拍呢，这样听众听下来，这个我觉得非常吻合，然后是我感兴趣的一些话题，所以这个是一些简单的，但这个你真的要开始做的话，是非常费功夫的一个幕后的前期工作。
The next key consideration that we tell students is practice. If you're in our classes, that might be an hour and a half once a week, and that is not enough time. You need to be practicing outside of class. And here's the reasons why you want to be practicing outside of class. The first, it's going to help you to identify weaknesses in your piece, right? If you're not fully memorized, well, you're going to know if you're not able to get through the piece without stopping to look at your script. If you're struggling with being in time, these speeches have time limits. So that's something that you're going to need to take a look at. Well, did I cut my piece to be within time, considering memorization, considering practicing? So identifying your weaknesses in your speech and where you need to improve. The next is being able to improve your style of speech delivery. When you're practicing, you might realize, definitely I recommend, I didn't put it on here in the tips, but having someone else, like a parent maybe or a sibling, watch if you can, or record yourself, but you might be able to see I think I'm doing this, but that's not actually what I'm doing. And so it can help you to improve your speech delivery and the style of your speech delivery. Next, practicing is going to boost your confidence. If you're not prepared, you're going to feel less confident being able to perform in front of an audience. So by practicing, you're going to be able to boost your confidence. And on the other side of that is decreased speech anxiety. So many students feel anxious about performing in front of others. And a lot of that comes from, are you prepared? If you're prepared, there's nothing to feel anxious about. So being able to decrease your speech anxiety comes through practicing. Also, discipline. We talked about two of our students, Helen and Nathan, and how they're going to nationals. And to go to nationals, they had to work very hard and compete at some of the highest levels. And the only way they could do that is if they were consistently practicing and putting in the work and the hours and time into their piece. So it really helps you improve your discipline, because if you want to see the results, you need to be spending the time consistently doing that. And finally, it builds your foundational skills. Practicing at home helps you to build your skills in vocalization, build your skills in terms of how to cut a piece. So these are the reasons why we really tell students practicing is the only way you're going to be able to see the results that you want, well, besides having your coach help you. So the tips that I always give students is quality over quantity. It's not about practicing every day, all day long. That's not going to make you better. What you need to do is practice quantity. So that means when you're practicing, you're setting aside the time and putting in the energy and effort to practice correctly. The next is practice for performance. Don't practice laying down in your bed. That never works. Don't practice, without fully being committed and present. So if you're like kind of like slumped over, if you're not practicing your voices correctly, you're not going to get the results. So practice as if you're performing it in front of whatever the chosen audience is. This is really one of the best ways to increase your overall success, is practicing it as if you're always giving it as a performance. Next is pace yourself, because if you're thinking about competing, the season can be very long, and so many students will get burned out and get tired of their piece and they'll want to give up. So I always tell students, pace yourself, give yourself breaks. Take a, look at your script, set it down, come back, pace yourself. It's not a race, it is a marathon. So take your time and build up your skills, but also challenge yourself. If you are finding yourself getting bored, if you're finding yourself not hitting the marks, give yourself little challenges. It can be as simple as, I'm going to use a different vocalization for practicing, or I give my students a really fun challenge, or I think it's fun, is if you can say your piece normally, take a section, tell yourself, I'm going to start from the middle and give my speech all the way to the end. If you can do that without having to look at your script, that's a great way to challenge your sense of memorization. So set challenges to challenge yourself, to push yourself to the next level. Never rest on good enough, this is okay. Always find a way to push yourself to that next level.
OK， 练习的话，这个反正大家都知道，对不对？但是这个的话，真正可以做到的，不见得会有很多学生，尤其是如果是一个讲稿，反复在那里练，反复在那里练。但是这个练习的量，就是如果不到的话，就完全是可以，你完全可以区分出来，哎，这个就是这个学生他量已经到了，练习的量到了，所以他可以每次表演的话，每次去比赛的话，他都可以非常基本上是可以可控的那种输出嘛，对不对？但有些如果没有练习，它包括他的那个所有这种人物演绎啊或者什么都不是特别熟的话，那绝对是不行的。所以我这边的话我不再啰嗦了，因为当中也有那个中文嘛，我想大家都知道，大家都懂，这个练习练习练习，这是关键字，对不对？最重要的。
And last but not least, competition and revision. So on the competition side, it's going to, or say why you want to compete and why you want to revise. It's going to increase your improvement, right? So yes, practicing is great, but if you're not going out and testing those skills, how are you going to know if you've actually accomplished your goal? So you need to, and it's really the fastest way to increase your improvement is going out and constantly testing those skills and seeing, did I meet my goal? Next, you get to learn from others, right? We don't want to have you live in a vacuum. We want you to go see other performers who might be better than you, or maybe they're not, and they did something you're like, oh, that wasn't good. And you can learn a lot by watching other competitors around you. Next, it helps you track success. When you can be able to say every time you compete, you're improving your score, right? This helps you to say, okay, I'm going in the right direction. And finally is feedback. You're going to get feedback from the judge, and this goes hand in hand with revision. Every time you get that feedback, you want to go through and say, okay, what do I need to do to get that, to improve my score, to get to that next level, to move forward. So competition is really the best way to get a lot of feedback at once. Whereas if you just stay home and do your piece, yes, you'll get to gain some of these skills. If you stay in the classroom, you'll gain even more skills, but competition will really push you to the next level. And so we tell students starting out, now, you don't have to jump in and commit to competing every weekend or competing, just full force, but we do encourage students to challenge themselves to compete at least 2 times per semester. I understand it can be very scary to compete, but that's the reason why we are doing speech and debate communication, is because we want to become better communicators, or it is to help us become better communicators. And so doing 1 to 2 tournaments per semester is really a good way to, the first one is to, rip off the Band-Aid and become like, oh, this is not that bad, I can do this. And the second one is just, again, to follow up and be able to say, okay, the first one was just practice. This one, now I'm ready to take the next step and see what can I really gain from this process in terms of improving. So starting out, it's not a full commitment, but it definitely helps to at least do 1 or 2 per semester.
OK。这个练习跟比赛的话，基本上是像一个周期一样，对不对？只有这2个同时进行，才可以有一个闭环的效应。那个你如果只是练习，但是他不去比赛的话，你就没有那么多反馈，你也没办法追踪自己的进步，也没办法追踪自己的就是到底在哪里出了问题，对不对？所以一定需要通过比赛这当中再去升华，再去进步，再去提高自己。那到后面就像华山论剑一样，对不对？你不跟人家去比一比的话，没办法，不知道那个武功盖世的人在哪里。所以这个演讲辩论真的就有点像体育上面一样，对不对？只有通过不停的比赛，才能去找很多自己不足的地方，然后再去进步。我们一开始就像新生的话，我们会他已经把基础课程上过之后，我们尽量让他可以就是1个学期可以比赛2次，到后面的话有可能比赛勤的话，尤其加入我们的竞赛队的话，可能是1个月就要至少比赛2次的样子，节奏就会加快很多。但是都是一个过程嘛。OK, Coach Asha, I'm going to talk about this piece. OK, 那个比我想象中的花的时间要多一点，因为我们有中英文对照。我们本来以前的话就是要么中文，要么英文。我们今天的话就是做一个尝试，如果不足的地方给我们反馈，我们可以再重新再提高。那个这一块我就直接用中文讲了。就下一步的话，那是怎么样呢？听了这个信息之后可以做些什么呢？第一是如果你是新的家长的话，不用着急，我们这个也是一步一步来。那个我们还有几个讲座，就是在接下去几个礼拜，我们会把这4类，这个演讲辩论总共是有4类嘛。一个是今天讲的这个演绎类表演类的，然后还有5月5号北京时间5月6号是我们会讲即兴类的，就 limited prep 准备时间比较短的这些演讲怎么去做。然后第3个是5月26号北京时间5月27平台类。平台类呢，就是很多是会以说服啊，或者就是给 会给很多信息的那种演讲，就是在工作职场当中会比较接近的一些演讲类。然后最后一个是辩论，6月9号的时候，我们会再仔细讲一下辩论类的一些准备跟一些要素之类的。所以这个是接下去我们会继续做的一些讲座。然后简单讲一下，就是我们因为今天讲了这个 intern 演绎类的话，如果暑假我说这个听上去不错，然后我们正好也学了一期了，那最适合的就是我们会训练学生做演绎类表演类的，就是这个 workshop 工作坊 Introduction to Acting Workshop 是1周的，所以时间不是很长。知道那个很多家长学生今年暑假一定需要出去旅游的，对不对？要 travel 的没有关系，你看看这个时间段合不合适。如果不合适没关系，我们平时的话秋季跟春季都有这些 interp 的课，就是表演类的课。我们是在 Irvine 跟 Anaheim 都有这个课程，可以看一下就时间段哪个适合你。如果是对我们课程感兴趣或者从来没有学过的话，没有关系，我们还有其他的课程，比如说像新生的有 novice， 这是一周的内容，所以而且我们当中会安排几个，每一周会讲不一样的一些内容，基本上是有点像开胃小菜一样的，你可以先试一试，然后到秋季的时候再可以从我们的 Art of Public Speaking 开始学，或者呢就在暑假的时候就想把这个前期的一些最基本的都学掉，太好了 OK， 我们喜欢你 OK， 那你可以就上这个 intensive 基本上就是跟我们秋季跟春季课程的我们叫演讲艺术入门课程是对等的，所以把这个学掉之后就可以进阶去上一些像表演类啊、即兴类啊、平台类啊，或者就是辩论了 OK， 然后当中还有一些就是基本上是这些进阶的课程，你去工作坊的模式1周1次的，还有最后一个是已经有一段时间在我们的课程里面，然后想开始做明年的准备的，那可以考虑参加我们这个 Varsity Summer 的 workshop。OK， 所以如果有对我们课程感兴趣的话呢，可以上网或者就是直接扫码进我们网站可以查看信息。OK， 我们好像超时了。OK，Coach Asha，we actually already passed the time。那个家长的话，如果有什么问题，可以打在这个对话框里面 ，chat 里面，沈老师跟 David 老师可以帮忙看一下有没有，或者直接问也可以，就是解除静音，直接问一下也可以。因为我们今天人也不是很多，然后我看一下最后我可以先把如果需要走的没有关系，要联系我们的话 ，email 之类都有，然后还有我们3个人的 WeChat QR code 可以扫码也可以。我先看一下 YouTube 这边有没有看看有没有问题之类的。然后其他家长有什么问题的话，可以问。我们3个 demo 的 video 想办法，待会儿可以。Coach Asha, do you want to post the link to the 3 sample videos? If you can, so people can still grab it. I don't think we'll have time to play it. Let's see. Okay, let me do. Okay, I think we are actually is this all clear? Hopefully this is
It really does
okay.
need it. Which one did you want?
Do you want, we have like 3 of them, right? Three links if you want to include those. All 3.
Let's see. How do you want to?
Just post it on the Zoom chat.
Okay, hold on.
Here we go.
Hold on, I have to get the other. Let's see.
家长们，你们还有时间想看一下吗？还是我就把链接发给你们了？那个时间也不早了，都可以。有没有大家有什么问题吗？我不知道是不是我中英文的把大家讲晕掉了，有点云里雾里了。
Let me see, is it? I think I sent them to you, Wei.
Okay.
In the
Okay.
chat, the links for the videos.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten the declamation one, but I just put storytelling is the first one and poetry is the second one.
Okay. I'm going to post it over here. Okay. 非常抱歉，这个一个技术问题没有把它给完美的呈现出来。OK。
Find the declamation.
Oh, 很清楚，没问题。OK, great, great. Thank you, Esther.
Let's see.
OK。最后一个连接发了，如果大家没有问题的话，我们就收了。今天的 Zoom 就到这里，讲座就到这里。然后我们下一次的话就是5月，我看一下，5月5号，然后北京时间是5月6号，我们继续讲一下 Limited Prep 即兴演讲。Oh,
Okay, I think that should be declamation.
OK, 可以。
Yeah, the 2 pieces for storytelling and poetry are our student Helen, and the declamation is not one of our students, but it is a good example of declamation.
Wait, is it? Coach Asha, is that the same link? Oh, it's not. I think it seems to be the same link. Is that right, Coach Asha?
I think I put it in the for you. See, did I put the right one though?
Okay, you know what? Next time when we do it, okay, come back. 你们下一次如果可以回来的话，我想办法先就开始讲 limited prep， 我们再补一下课 ，OK， 我们 make up 一下，然后基本上差不多花不了3-4分钟，然后把 interp 的几个 demo 再给大家放一下。真的非常抱歉，今天我这个技术号称技术难，但是技术失败了 ，OK， 非常抱歉 ，OK。那今天先到这里吧，我们跟大家说晚安了，或者周六好，周末愉快了。Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Do.